Your parents never knew about this mental health awareness. They didn't know they could like speak on, abuse that happened to them by a family member. All of these things that have come up, they didn't know how to deal with that. The only way they knew was to sweep it under the rug.
Pulse of Polynesia. Baseline rumble, feel the ground quake. Drums hit harder than a tidal wave break. Hands in the air, let the crowd participate. We move the islands up. Yeah, the vibe came. Some strength in my blood, call it lava flow. Words are up every.
Welcome to another episode of Pulse of Polynesia. I'm your host, Laie, joined by my amazing co-host, Crystal Stephanie, streaming tonight from Las Vegas. Tonight, we are honored and excited to feature an inspiring leader whose work sits at the powerful intersection of healthy equity, community empowerment, cultural identity, and service. Oreta Mapu-Tupola. Oreta is a dedicated community health advocate and nonprofit leader committed to uplifting Pacific Islander and undeserved communities through culturally grounded programs, mentorship, and service. Tonight, we'll explore her journey, her purpose, and the work she's doing to help build a healthier and stronger future for our people. So without further ado, please join us in welcoming Oreta Mapu-Tupola.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be on here to just share my story and the work that I've been doing with community, but especially to meet you. And I've watched a lot of the podcasts that you have shared and just have admired the culture that you share, the awareness that you share, especially the guests that you have had on here, just sharing their different, walks in life. And I just wanted to share about how I'm grateful for that and how it might impact the work that I do as well in community.
You know what, Oreta, let's talk about your history. Let's talk about your journey to where you what got you to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Laie, Hawaii. It's a predominantly Mormon community, a small community. Mostly everybody is related or has family or has connection through, a lot of our community migrates from the islands to Hawaii first, and then they go out to, the rest of the mainland. And I graduated out of Kahuku High School, kind of lived my life backwards where, was strong LDS family, but still not perfect. And so I started my family before I went back to school, non-traditional student. I got pregnant out of high school. My freshman year at college, my husband was still in high school. But just had to learn a lot of things in a backwards kind of way because of the choices that I made. But even in making those mistakes, I just learned so much about, from other women in my community, especially my mother and my grandmothers, about, not giving up on your dreams just because you hit an obstacle in life or like things didn't turn out the way it was supposed to be. And they never made me feel like because I made those wrong decisions that I was useless or worthless or now, you just ruined your life. They always, even when I got pregnant, usually in Polynesian families, you just get married automatic because you have a baby now. Well, my parents, they told me, you don't have to get married just because of the baby. It shouldn't be the reason why you're getting married. But my husband and I, we wanted to get married. And so we did. But my family never shunned me for that decision that I made. But they always supported me. And even while I had my kids, I had 4 kids. And every year I kept saying, I'm going to go back to school because my grandmother and my grandfather they pushed us to education first, after the church and family, you got to get your education. So they always said, well, when are you going to go back to school? And I had thought in the beginning, like, well, now I just going to take care of my kids. There's no use for me to go back to school now. I have a different focus. But they encouraged me, and so did other women in the community. And before you know it, I was back in school after my 3 kids, then found out I was pregnant again. Anyways, fast forward, I went straight through school with these very strong Polynesian women in my circle, in my home, and then also in the school that I went to, Brigham Young University of Hawaii. and they just encouraged me to share my life lessons with other people who might think that it's not a possibility for them to continue in their own dreams and in their own pathways because of obstacles or trials that they faced in their life. And that just became a pattern in my own life. And every obstacle that I faced, I was able to turn that around, and then kept getting asked, can you come and speak at this high school event or this, community event about your life experiences and how you change those circumstances around. And before you know it, I was back in school studying social work, because when I looked back at the other kids that I hung around with, even my own family members, many of us were going through these things already. Our parents had gone through them. My mom was pregnant when she was in high school. My grandmother was pregnant when she was younger. And I really wanted to go back and share with a lot of the kids who felt like, well, this is just going to be my life. I'm going to do the same thing, the same patterns, and repeat them over and over again. And that's how social work became my major. And I just, again, pursued my master's straight after that bachelor's program, because I gave a presentation on the chief system, the Matai system in Samoa, speaking about the matriarch's role in that, right? Because I heard a lot from my husband's family, like, oh, the Tongan culture is a matriarchal culture. Your culture is patriarchal. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because all my life, even though these men held these titles, my grandmother was who they came to every time there was some kind of conflict in the village or the family. And I seen that all my life. These men come and visit her, and they sit for hours with her talking about things, and then they would go back and, go to the village council or whatever and do what they need to do. And so I had shared my presentation about the role of the women, and that we're also very respected in this Matai system that is usually made up of men. And one of my professors said, you need to share more of your perspective from your experiences, and don't hold back. Just share the things that you learn, because other people are learning from them. And I really found my voice from these other women that were very strong minded. I felt like that you couldn't compare me to them because they were held at such a high standard. But when I did find my voice, opportunities just kept coming up to serve and to share my story and to, help other people. And it eventually ended up, led me here to Utah. I never wanted to leave Hawaii ever. I kept saying, I will never move to Utah, because I lived here, in high school when my parents got divorced, and then I hated it. I was like, I never felt or experienced racism in my life until I moved here. And we lived here just for a short while, but when we went home, I told my mom, I'm never moving back there. And then my kids came here from my in-laws, and they loved it here, and so we ended up moving here. And when we moved here, I said, what am I going to do in Utah? My goal of going back to school was to give back to my community and to help the people in my community to build capacity. And now I'm over here with people who have resources, who have money, who have nice houses. This is my perception. And I thought that everybody, this is how naive I was too, coming from the islands. I thought everyone in Utah was more members of the church. As old as I am when I came, I assumed that. And then when I got here, I learned that it was so different than what I had, what I had thought. And I found my community here and found that there's very similar needs to my community back home. And that just started, the ball rolling in the work that I'm doing here in Utah.
Oreta, I want to ask you something. I'm going to go back to how you talked about when you found out you were pregnant in your early stages of this. Growing up in American Samoa, and I'm not saying like this is what everybody goes through, but I've come across so many women at a young age who they really got their butt kicked from their parents. They got their hair cut or was disowned by their parents. a lot of times it was the image that they have to uphold for the family. Like what you do affects that family. You mentioned something that you had so much support behind you from your mother, your auntie. And I wanted to ask you, for those who are going through it right now, what is your advice to them who doesn't have that support?
I think we all have support systems. We just assume that the people that we are closest to, or should be the people we are closest to, is who we need to look for that support from. But sometimes it's not your mom. Sometimes it's your grandma or your auntie or a teacher from high school. For me, one of those mentors was one of my classmates' mother. She was our home visitor for Head Start. And she was one of those mentors that I could tell her anything. And cause she saw more than us. So she would say to me, like, you should talk to your parents about it. They're always going to help guide you in the way that you should go and not give you bad advice about things and support you. And so I would say to find those people who support you and lean on them for that support and that guidance. Cause sometimes you won't get it from your grandparents or your, depending on, the belief system. You won't get it from your mom, maybe because they have their own experiences that they've gone through, and they can only use the tools that they have to try to guide you. And for some of our parents, that was the tool, was to beat you up and hope that you learn your lesson. You know what I mean? My mother, because of her upbringing, she had a hard upbringing. Her father and her was in the military, and my grandmother was she just came from the Highlands, didn't know a lot. So my mom had to learn a lot of things on her own. And one thing she told me my sister and I, when we were growing up, is that I want you guys to always feel comfortable coming to me about anything. She said her mom never talked to her about like her menstrual period, like things that girls would go through. And so she had to learn that from school. She went to school and it happened, and she's like, oh no, what do I do? And so they had to teach her. And so she said she didn't want us to be that way. And so she always had built an open relationship with us, talk about sex, about dating, about all the things. And so that's why I guess I felt comfortable when I found out that I was pregnant to go straight to them. That's who I went to when I first found out.
Wow, that's pretty unique. And at the same time, being able to find out that you had that comfort to be able to speak to your parents. What pushed you to go to school? Was it the fact that you were expecting? Didn't you know? A lot of times these girls would just decide to quit and focus on their kids. What motivated you to finish school?
Like I said, it was something like my aunties and uncles all had their degrees. And so it was something that was common in our family. But the thing that pushed me to go was, you know how you're young and your parents tell you all these things and you're like, oh yeah, whatever, and you don't listen. And you think, oh, you don't know, it's not the same when you were younger. My life is different, blah, blah, blah. I had to learn again the hard way. I got married and had my kids, and my husband was the only one working. He was working for his family business and other jobs. So he was the main provider. And there were some rocky times in our marriage that, cause we were very young. We got married straight out of high school. We didn't know anything, but as we were, trying to build our family, we had some rocky times. And I realized I could hear my grandma and my mom saying, you now you did this and you don't have nothing to fall back on. If he leaves you or if he dies or whatever, what are you going to do? How are you going to support your children? And we were living on the system, government programs at the time. And it was like a struggle for me, because when we didn't qualify for it, then we had to figure out what we're going to do, because Hawaii is so expensive. So there were times when I said, oh, well, I'm going to go look for a job. And the only jobs I qualified for I was almost 9 months pregnant working at the gas station, which was like 30 minutes away from our house. And I worked a grave shift. So I had to drive or get dropped off every night and go work. And one time my grandmother came to visit me because she felt so bad that I had to work and was pregnant. She drove in the middle of the night with my cousins down to Kaneohe, and she, oh, sorry, now I'm getting emotional. she was crying because when she pulled up in the driveway, I was painting the curbs on the side of the gas station. It was part of my job. And so that night when I went home, she was telling me, it hurt me so much to pull up there and see you, pregnant and painting the side of the curb. And she told me, you gotta go back to school. That's why you need to go so that you have something to fall back on and you don't have to do that kind of work. And that really made me think about what I was doing with my life, but also thinking about how I was being asked to go and speak to all these kids about, getting pregnant and still having a chance to make your life better. And here I was just settling because I had already have my kids. I didn't have any goals to go back to school until, they kept saying that to me. And so I thought about my daughters, who are my two oldest. And I was like, I don't want my daughters to also fall in this place where they have to rely on a man to provide for themselves and then work these kinds of jobs. Not that it's a bad thing, but just that, if you don't have to, why do it, So, that's what pushed me to go back.
You remind me so much of Auntie Oreta.
Everybody
Your
calls
namesake. Because she is someone that I look up to. I look up to you too, Oreta, because you've done so much for the community. And I can attest for it because I've seen it, I've witnessed it, and I've experienced the help that you've given us in Utah. You're like a silent worker, but bam, it's like it really just helps everyone in the community. That's what I love so much about you, because whenever I have questions, remember during COVID, I would oh my gosh, who do I ask? Oh, I'm going to ask Oreta. And so you would give me all these resources and saying, here are all the resources. Here's where you can go on to find out what our people can do so that way they can stay safe from COVID. And that's one of the things that I admire about you, because you're a doer. You say what you're going to do, but you're going to do what you're going to do wherever it is that you are. And so Utah is so blessed to have you there, so that because you work so hard for our whole community over there.
Thank you.
I have to ask you, Oreta, especially what Crystal just mentioned about how you're very quiet and silent behind it all. And you had mentioned earlier off the record about how you like to just stay quiet. You don't want to speak up until it's your time to talk. And so this platform is for you. This is for you to be able to share your journey, your story. And so I'm very grateful to be able to push you out of that norm so that we can bring all the insight and the knowledge that you have to share. And with that said, Oreta, I wanted to ask you, what your experience of what you had to endure, what you shared, and what you've been experienced with the community. What are the Polynesian people, especially the women, what are they silently carrying right now that they don't want to share, that's eating up inside?
I think something that has come up this past week, even, one of the organizations I was with, they hold a women's empowerment group. And one of the topics that had come up for them is just this, quiet, exhaustion of always having to be the helper, the strong person, the I take care of it, I'll take care of it all kind of person, and never show your vulnerability. But in a way, also, it was a flex that, I could do all these things and never be tired, but in the background, our health is not, holding up, because we're always having to be there, always having to show up. And I don't think that people understand, that added pressure it is for our women. I hear Black women speak about this a lot. The added pressure to always be strong and always to hold up the family. And without sharing what the group women were sharing, just a general, I guess overall feeling from Pacific Island women is just that I always feel like I have to be there. And I can personally say that I grew up that way, because my mom was raising us as a single parent, but she always was the strong person. We just always see them. And like you were saying about your dad, you think that they're always going to be there and always going to be strong, until now I'm older and she's older and she has a lot of health issues going on with her. And she has like now put her boundaries up there, and she was like sharing with us as she learned, like, you don't always have to be there. Like sometimes it's okay for you to say, I'm so sorry, I cannot make it. But because we grew up that way, I always say yes. I can never say no to anyone, no matter what happens, until this last year. With all the political things going on and the hit that our communities got, taking away DEI and funding and all of that, it really hit hard. And I had ended up in the hospital several times last year. And every time I went, they said, "Oh, is there something that you're stressing about that's happening right now in your life that you're doing?" I'm like, "Oh no," because it's normal. This is always going on. And so it wasn't until like maybe the fourth time that I finally told the doctors told me, if you don't take care of this, you're going to die from the stress. And it really got me to sit back and talk with my husband about all the things I was doing. And so I started writing all the things on a piece of paper that I did. Like I had 3 full-time jobs, doing community work, my church calling, and then taking care of my family. It was a lot. And I realized that I really had to take care of myself, or the reason why I was doing all that to provide for my family, I wouldn't be able to provide for my family if I wasn't here, if I was dead. And so this year in January, I quit all of the jobs. And even though financially we're struggling because I don't have that extra income, my peace and my health has just changed like drastically, because I was able to say I can't do it. And I'm struggling because I have FOMO. I'm like, all these things are happening without me, and I want to be in the front and center helping people. But at the same time, I have so much more clarity about put more intention into the time that I spend and who I spend it with, that it's just as meaningful as it was when I was doing all the busy work. So, I think that's the thing that I see a lot. It's not even when I share that, people are like, "Oh, you're so good." Da, da, da. It's not only my story. So many women are going through this kind of silent, just being tired all the time, but then showing this facade that they can handle it. It's okay. I got it. I don't need help.
I think also too that we forget that not only are the women dealing with this, but also the men are also facing the same, experience, and so we forget the male at the same time. Also, I wanted to ask you, like, even though we're going through we have our own trauma that we face growing up, and we were able to deal with that in a different way. But for those who are not able to express trauma, can you tell me, like, why is it that within our own Polynesian community, from what you've experienced through you going out there to speak on this, what was your experience in learning about our people that makes it so difficult for them to talk about their trauma? You mentioned how there's that flex. We want to be able to show that we can do this. We're not only strong, but we're mentally strong, physically, mentally, and spiritually, but not realizing that behind the scenes we're breaking down inside. And so, for what you know with trauma, what makes it so difficult for our people to talk about it, to share it, and to use therapy or whatever means to help, release that trauma?
I think it's what we talked about earlier, about like holding family reputations where they are, that expectation to represent your name, your last name, where you come from. Even I think I shared about the suicides that we're seeing a lot in our youth. I don't think that our community also understands the extent that is a lot of pressure for our youth. Our generation, I think we grew up like, that's just how you have to be. Just suck it up and move on. And this newer generation, we try to raise them in a different way that they haven't experienced that. And now it's a lot of pressure for them to hold up that name. If I don't hold up, like say, my family has a lot of athletes who have gone to the NFL, and then my son doesn't make it to the NFL. Some of our men are struggling because they can't live up to that name. And I've seen a lot of our young men turn to, different, making different choices because it's a lot of shame. It's a lot of shame to show up. Like we were joking around, at a farewell for one of our nephews. A lot of our nephews have gone on their mission, and there's a couple of them that didn't go, and we joke around with them over there. We're like, oh, you're the only 3 who never go on your mission, but some of these kids, they can't even it's not a joke to them. It's a lot of pressure, and in ways that we don't know, they're hiding. They don't come to certain family events, they don't participate in the things. Those are the things, patterns that I see in them, and I know that it's because of the shame. I know that it's because they feel that pressure of holding up this reputation for our family name. And so it's hard for them to admit that there is trauma or to ask for help for it. But also our culture and community say to our kids, like, you're weak if you show any kind of vulnerability. So to show that, to not show that, again, to keep up to that reputation, no one's wanting to admit or even say that, well, I feel sad because this is happening. Or like if a death happens in the family, it's always be strong, famalosi. That's all you hear. That's all I ever heard growing up. And it's a lot. It's too much. And now that we're spreading so much awareness for our community that it's okay. We're creating these safe spaces that it's okay. There's a lot of, family secrets that are coming out, and people are not knowing how to deal with that trauma because now people are pointing finger at, oh, how come you knew and you didn't say anything? Or how come you didn't protect me? Our parents, I tell the youth that I work with now, these are hard times that we're discovering a lot of these things. But your parents, they only could deal with the things they could deal with the tools that they had at the time. Your parents never knew about this mental health awareness. They didn't know they could speak on, abuse that happened to them by a family member. All of these things that have come up, they didn't know how to deal with that. The only way they knew was to sweep it under the rug, to not show that how it's hurting them. And so I ask the kids to give their parents grace. And for some of them, it's hard. And for some of them, they're still trying to navigate that. So I think that a lot of it stems from that.
But they're so lucky. They're so lucky to be able to express themselves these days. Because I know growing up, I always got beat up. I was always the one that got beat up all the time because I always said something. And my mom's like, be quiet. And I'm like, well, I just had to say it because that's how I feel. Because she knows I'm the one that's emotional. And so all the rules I broke. Even though I get beat up, I just say what I say. But as they grew, because they're young parents. And as they grew, with me, I feel like they started to kind of scale back because it was the name thing for me. I always get irritated. Because so-and-so is going to say whatever. And I'm like, okay, so you guys care more about the name than about the situation that's going on? I go, someone's hurt in the family. We need to acknowledge that this person is hurt and they need to at least express themselves. You can't just hold it back and shh, hush, hush. But I love that the kids are being able to express themselves emotionally so that way they can tell their parents how they feel. And I love that the parents, us, are trying to understand where they're coming from because we've faced those things growing up because it's from generation to generation to generation. And we got to break that cycle from all the trauma that we've gone through because, it's going to help heal our society and our people and our culture. So I love that. I love that you shared that. I hope you continue to really, because I see that you work with a lot of people and I'm glad that you shared. I thought you were bionic women. I'm just seeing you, sis. Seriously, because every time I see you, I'm like, dang, this girl, she's doing everything, she's doing all the things. And I was just so proud of you because you're here, you're there, you're here. And then expressing those things in the background, I never knew. I never thought that Superwoman you could ever, have all this stuff going on behind the scenes, but seeing it here with this podcast, thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability with us.
Yeah.
And showing that, things do happen in the background, and you had to scale back and, say no. And that was the hardest thing for me growing up too, is like, I used to say yes, 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 yes to everything. Yeah. And then I realized how stressed I was getting, Yeah. And I was like, why am I saying yes all the time? Because I was so afraid to say no. And then now, now that I'm older, I'm like, I'm so glad I said no. It makes me feel better because I'm not so stressed. So good job on that, sis. Good job.
I wanted to add to what Krista was saying, that it is true that these kids are very lucky that they're able to express. And at the same time, like us adults, we're able to, okay, now we gotta scale down a little to try to understand where they're coming from, why they feel the way they do. Because it's such a different environment for these generation, that our environment was so different. We're caught up in this. Everybody's kind of like-minded. If this family here does the same teaching to their kids as the way we do with our kids, and so being able to change because of the way that the environment is, at the same time difficult, right? Because what you mentioned, Oreta, and I think Krista, about the incident that happened with the kids who committed suicide. That's so sad, because you wonder, you're able to express yourself. Did the people not allow you to be able to speak to you, to have that support system? What is your take on that? Because it's different being in America versus those that are on the island. What is going on with this generation here in America?
Yeah, I think it's again those same things of shame and holding reputation, especially with our faith and some of the things that we believe in our faith. But I'll say the one thing that I think has been helpful in how we've been addressing a lot of these generational, traumas and all of that, is that before, I remember they used to create these interventions for our kids and then create these interventions for adults or men or women, very, very segregated. But our community and our culture is very collective. It's not about the individual. It's about how it impacts the whole family. And so we've now created these models, or are now implementing these models, that if I go to the youth and I speak to them about sex, I'm going to go to the parents now and speak to them the same thing I talked to the youth, because what was happening is we're teaching the youth, then the youth go home and then the parents say, hey, Balea, don't come over here and tell me this, you Sofia Poco. I remember my grandma used to always tell me, you think you have a PhD, but I have a degree from the streets. I know more than you. So she used to always tell us that, but there had to be teaching across the board, because we didn't want the kids to go home and then think, well, there's no use doing any of this. In fact, some of the youth they said, it's not, I can't say anything when I go home, because like you said, Krista, they just tell me, hey, close your mouth, don't talk. You don't speak to the adults. You don't add your, whatever to the adults when they're talking. And so we really had to have these separate sessions, and we went to one of the wards, youth activity, and we used music to share this lesson of communication and how to finding different outlets to express yourself when you're feeling, some type of way. So we started together, then we separated the youth, and they did a musical workshop, and then we separated the parents, then we did a curriculum called Families Talking Together. And that curriculum was based on teaching parents how to have conversations about sex with their children. And one of the separate class we were talking, and one of the Tongan men that were in that group, we said, okay, can you explain what we just shared with you? And he's like, oh yeah, this program is to talk to our children, how to talk about, and then he's whispered, X. He went like that, and we're like, why are you whispering? Because you don't talk about this kind of women,
It's taboo. With me growing up, my parents, I would, when I had questions about sex, they're just like, in the Bible, it says you're not supposed to do it when you're married. And I'm like, so what does that mean? It means that you're going to get in trouble if you, and I'm just like, so what does that mean? Am I going to get in trouble if I have sex? And then, I'd always get beat on because I have things. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm just asking a question. I just want to understand what's going on. is it good? Is it bad? And they didn't know, they didn't even know how to answer because they were so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Especially my mom, because she would always say, stop talking about that. That's not something that you should talk to us about. You have to know that we're not your friends. And I'm just like thinking to myself, so who do I ask? Do I ask my friends? And that's how I'm like, oh, I guess I'm going to ask my friends. I'm going to ask my teacher. Just that discomfort with our Polynesian families, it's something that needs to be discussed because they're going to go ask everyone and everybody else besides their parents because their parents are like, let's not talk about that. That's not something that we should talk about, And so I've never gotten to experience that growing up because I've always just thought, oh my gosh, my parents, they're so hard to talk to because I, bring up certain topics and they're like, that's not something that we should discuss at this time. And I'm just like, are you uncomfortable talking to me about it? Or is it just because, or they'll open their scriptures up. Say in the scripture, I'm like, I'm not asking you for scriptures. I'm just asking for your advice, your counsel about these things.
Yeah.
My dad was okay with it, but my mom, she would not. That's something that she would not talk about at all. And so, I'm just grateful that I had at least my dad to talk about things because he was like, well, these are kind of the things that go on and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, interesting, but it's just so hard. So I can just imagine, the kids these days trying to get that topic with their parents and feeling uncomfortable because their parents are probably telling them the same thing.
Yeah.
But it needs to be discussed. So I love that you guys have,
that's the thing. What was good about it was, so when we bring the parents back, how in the chapels they have those accordion kind of divider thingies?
Yeah.
Well, the youth was on one side and the parents were the other side. And we had one of the I want to say she was Miss Utah something. She came and spoke about her experience in having suicidal ideation and having tried to commit suicide before. And her mother was in that room when she was speaking. And the mother had shared that she also had gone through the same thing. And her daughter had never heard that from her mother. So in that way, they connected there. When we opened the accordion, the youth and the parents were facing each other, and we had them get together with their kids and then now share with each other what they learned from the 2 workshops. And then after the workshop, we were asking them for their feedback, and the parents were so grateful because they were like, mothers with their sons said, I would have never known how to have this conversation with my son, and the kid said the same thing. I would have never asked my mom this if we were at home, in any other situation. And so from that workshop, we just kept doing it over and over again. And during the shooting that happened here with the students at Hunter, we did the same thing. We had a community training about trauma-informed care. And many of the uncles and the men of those kids were present, and a lot of the service providers. And they were saying, man, we need more of our community to get this kind of training so that we understand. One of the men said, I grew up in this gang life, and I never realized that our actions and the way that we act was an example to our kids that that's how they want to be, or that's all there is to be, or, they want to, every boy wants to be like their dad, or their uncles, and they're who they look up to. And he said he never realized that now he knows that he needs to tell their kids, that was my life. This is not the life that you need to live or to live up to. And that was so powerful, being able to do that.
Shake, silent fever, wave riders, lava rivers, no